On today's show, we dive into the game of the biggest defenseman who's going to be picked on day one in the first round of the 2025 NHL Draft, Radim Mrtka.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm your host, Sebastian Hyde, the USHL scout over at Elite Prospects, and today's a very fun episode as we're going to be doing a deep dive on the game of Radim Mrtka, a 6'6", 198-pound right shot defenseman playing with the Seattle Thunderbirds in the WHL. In the first segment, we're going to be breaking down the profile of this player as well as his puck skills. In the second segment, we're going to explore the overall toolkit, the skating, the physicality, as well as the habits with the help of our handy little tactics board. And finally, in the third segment, we'll be rounding out the show, talking about his NHL projection, where he's going to go on draft day, and what teams would be good fits for him in the NHL. But before we jump into the entire episode, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So let's jump right into the show here. And Radim Mrtka is a really fun player because his transition this season from European hockey to North American hockey has seen a big boost in his draft stock. And that's not only been because of the exposure that's gotten him, and with a lot more scouts getting live viewings on him now, but also his game is really suited to North American ice. He uses his range very, very intelligently, as we'll explore in today's episode, in terms of shutting things down defensively. There's a lot of runway with this player on the defensive side of things, and I think that a lot of NHL teams are going to be salivating at the idea of adding him into their groups. So Radim Mrtka, as we mentioned, 6'6", 198 pounds, as a right shot defenseman. He's from Czechia. He's been developing in Czechia his entire career until his move halfway through the season this year. He did play 21 games in Czechia this year, split between the Czech Pro League, 1 game in the Czech Second Pro League, and also 10 games in the Czech U20 League, where he got 4 assists in that span. And the offense has exploded since that move to North America with the Seattle Thunderbirds, a team that hasn't been very strong this season, and were very much searching for any way to get more help in their lineup. And Mrtka has been more than what they could have possibly expected. He's playing almost 30 minutes every single game on both sides of the ice, big minutes on the penalty kill, big minutes on the power play, bigger minutes still at even strength. And he has 3 goals and 27 points in 27 games so far, accompanied by 28 penalty minutes. So taking some penalties, but considering how much he's on the ice against the top lines of every single WHL team, I think that's pretty good in terms of also still getting used to North American ice and just the pace at which you have to execute and the lack of space and time. And he's been adapting really, really well. And prior to recording this episode, I did a full viewing of this player, and that was against the Kelowna Rockets. This happened just yesterday at time of recording, on February 11th, where he got 2 assists in a 3-2 win, played 27 and a half minutes in that game, and was just a shutdown force. He's a really fluid skater. There's a lot of, I think, agility moving forward. Going backwards is still some awkwardness. He's still getting used to his big frame, but still a player, I think, where skating is not going to be a detractor at the NHL level by any means. And beyond that, so physical, but what makes the physicality so functional and projectable is the intelligence that is supported by it. He is one of the most aware defensemen in the 2025 NHL draft class, constantly making great reads, as we're going to be really digging into in the second segment with the tactics board. But before we do any of that, let's first delve into the puck skills, because this is an interesting area of Mrtka's game. This is not where his biggest strengths lie, in my opinion. That will come definitely more in the second segment. But still, there are some positive qualities in here. I mean, of course, this is a big physical shutdown defender, but who's getting a lot of offensive opportunities to showcase his puck skills in North America. So he's really been exploring these abilities of his, and I think they have progressed since he's made that move and the switch over to Seattle in the WHL. Starting off with the shooting. I don't think there's anything particularly special about his shot mechanically. I wouldn't say it's above average. 3 goals in 27 games, playing his amount of minutes every single game certainly doesn't jump off the page. I think there's a bit of a lack of just raw power behind his shot. This isn't a guy that can just unleash howitzers from the blue line, but still, I think a player that I've seen take intelligent shots where he's not shooting to score, but shooting for rebounds, shooting into dangerous areas where there's a lot of chaos and sticks where a deflection can happen, where his teammates are going in for flybys. The timing behind his shot is quite strong. So the habits underlying the shot, I think, are an area of strength, and they elevate mostly his playmaking game, honestly, rather than being a real goal scoring threat. But mechanically, there isn't all that much to write home about the shot. But still, I think a player that can use his shot proactively and will still gather some goals here and there throughout his NHL career. And I do think he will have an extensive NHL career. The passing. This is more interesting. This has definitely developed a lot more since he's switched over to North America. He's so involved on both sides of the puck, but with the puck, when Seattle has the puck, Mrtka is a true like pivot. Like he plays a key role in the breakout in the offensive zone. When players are pressured in possession, Mrtka makes himself available as an outlet option. He's very intelligent and gets into those pockets of space, gets his stick on the ice, opens up his body, makes himself available for those passes. Not afraid of being vocal either. I think we've seen this a little bit more in recent weeks of him being more vocal at the WHL level and demanding the puck in certain cases when he is more than right to do so. And I think that the passing game and the interconnected passing game and the pace at which he's passing in the rush especially is really ramping up at the moment. He's getting a lot of puck touches, but he's making a lot of really accurate, quick on the tape passes, keeping his feet moving. This is very much a pass and move kind of player. He doesn't pass and then wait around to see what he wants to do next. He has an idea immediately. He's not a passive player in that regard, which is something I really appreciate in his game. It's that aggressiveness, that proactivity, both defensively and offensively, which I do think gives him some runway offensively. He's not going to be an offensive defenseman in the NHL, but still a player that could explore that side of his game to become a true two-way impact guy who can chip in on a second power play unit as a distributor from the blue line, who has some on-puck composure. And even though the handling skill finally here isn't the strongest in the world, I think maybe slightly subpar. Not a particularly dynamic handler, but he's a very purposeful one. The tool itself isn't special, but I think there's a level of composure and intelligence in his on puck game that allows him to just make simple plays of cutting against the grain, against pressure into a little pocket of space, and then making a quick pass from that immediately. And that pace in terms of making a pass through that motion and escaping pressure in those more projectable NHL professional ways, I think bodes very well for this player in terms of also the breakout upside. There's a lot to like in his habits, and we'll dive into that a bit more in the next segment. But that wraps up this second segment. In the next one, as I mentioned, we're going to look at the tactics board. But first, we'll be digging into the overall toolkit, how these tools interact, as well as his skating and physicality. But first, a quick message from our sponsors. You just realized that your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all that you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. I've been in that spot where you just need the right hire like yesterday. The pressure is on, and every day without the right person is a real setback. That's exactly when Indeed sponsored jobs come in handy. They make sure that your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. All right, let's dive into the second segment here, where we'll be discussing first and foremost the skating and the physicality, and then we're going to look at how all of those tools interact, including the three puck skills that we discussed in the last segment. So, in terms of physicality, I think this is a very clear area of strength for Radim Mrtka. Of course, he's massive, but there's habits underlying that strength that I think is also really quite notable. And also to note, there's a lot of runway still in terms of him learning how to most effectively use his physicality. This is one of the younger players in the 2025 draft class as a June 9th, 07 birthday, just about a month and a half, 2 months and a half off of the cutoff for 2026. So he's on the younger side. He has that runway, but he's physically mature and he has some excellent puck protection habits, lowers the center of gravity. He's not afraid of engaging in board battles or initiating contact or board battles because he trusts himself to win those, which we're going to look at a little bit in the habits section. And on top of that, with that physicality, the lower body is already very, very strong, very stable. You do not push this player off the puck, especially at the junior level. And beyond that, I also think that the upper body has definitely shown some real flashes in terms of pushing off opponents, using his arms as puck protection tools in order to access the middle of the ice. In terms of also mitigating perhaps the limitations in his handling game of leveraging the physicality instead to create space and force his way through structures. So a lot to like on the physical side with this player. In terms of our elite prospects tool grade scale, Radim Mrtka sits at a 7. This goes up to 9. 7 is very much above average and certainly a standout tool, not only for this player, but among defensemen in general available in the 2025 draft class. And then we also have the skating, which is a 4.5 grade on our tool scale at elite prospects from our most recent rankings. I think that there are some limitations there. He's a bit of a hunched posture in his stride, but there's a real explosive lower body. And while there's still some awkwardness in terms of facing really pacey, aggressive rushers at their highest speeds, I mean, he is 6'6" at 17 years old. He's only turning 18 in June, as we just mentioned. He's still adapting to that situation very well, in my opinion. He combines his fluid edge work with that exposed lower body and his long reach to contain play very effectively. It's difficult to get past him, and even if you do, with that explosive lower body, he can catch up to plays as well, which is something that you don't see in every defenseman at this size. So a lot of really interesting aspects to this player, but let's look a little bit at how these tools all interact. The skating and the physicality, I think, combine very nicely. He's a player with very controlled gap control off the rush in terms of it's a very consistent, like 1 foot, half a foot away from the puck carrier. He keeps that really tight and times his interjections really, really deftly. This isn't a player that just blindly goes in with aggression, but is supported with explosive aggression when the time is right to make that play. And I think that gives him a lot of upside as a rush defender at the NHL level, especially when supported by some runway in terms of refining the skating, as well as just that crushing physical ability. So a lot to like on that side. In terms of the passing and handling, it's not dynamic, but it's rather pragmatic. I think that he's become a lot more controlled in his on-puck implications this season. He's a lot more chaotic earlier on in the year. There's definitely still flashes of that. I mean, he's playing 30 minutes a night as a 17-year-old who, again, is 6'6". And still, he's become this real conservative shutdown presence who is still finding ways to explore and get implicated offensively, which I think is an impressive balance to find so early on in his North American hockey career. So a lot to kind of like with this profile, but we're going to dive a little bit into the reasons that I am most excited about this prospect, and that is the brain, the tools, the habits. For our podcast audio listeners, for this segment, I'll be transitioning over to a tactics board and presenting visuals of how Mrtka plays with 3 specific examples of his on-ice habits that display how he plays on both sides of the puck. So you're more than welcome to check out the YouTube video if you want to see the visuals. And if you want to stay on the podcast, I will still be trying to vocalize everything, and you get some ASMR with the tactics board on top of that. So let's dive straight into that.
All right, welcome to the tactics board here. We have the Seattle Thunderbirds in yellow, in the yellow chips here, as well as the Kelowna Rockets in red on the right-hand side. Radim Mrtka is in real life number 21 for Seattle, but I only have chips going up to number 11, so he is number 11 for the purpose of this visualization at right shot defense. This is a game that Seattle won 3-2 against the Kelowna Rockets on February 11th, so just a very recent game. And let's dive into some of the habits of Radim Mrtka that he displayed in this game. The first of these that we're going to look at is in terms of rush defense. So let's transition the forwards over into the offensive zone. And the break is going the other way for the Kelowna Rockets. Puck carrier at left wing, number 3. And Radim Mrtka is the defender in this situation, trying to lock down the right side of the ice. Mrtka is an excellent scanner. His head is constantly on a swivel. He's not a player that is very easily caught off guard. He has a good idea of where the other threats are. He will already have a good idea of number 7 attacking the middle from down the middle lane at center, as well as number 4 trying to get around number 6 at left wing, trying to attack down the far side to provide another threat for Kelowna. So for Radim Mrtka in this situation, this is an aggressive defenseman who is quite proactive. He's a player that will want to first and foremost get the play going more towards the boards, shutting down the passing option to number 7 down the middle, where things can get a lot more dangerous and a lot more open. So you would see him as a right shot, keeping his stick, blocking this lane, while closing that gap very quickly. He's a controlled player in terms of matching footwork off the rush and the timing with which he makes his involvements, as well as the routes he takes to do that in terms of getting his stick in a disruptive position for the passing lane first to block off that chance before closing in on the puck carrier. This is something that in football and soccer they could call a cover shadow as well, in terms of using his stick to block that passing lane and curving his route in order to get to the puck with control and just kill out the play, snuff it out, and with that he layers stick and body. This is a very stick active defender, which I love to see in big physical guys who don't overly rely on those aspects of their game, but when he does layer the stick, then the body is something that can really kill these plays and take number 3 out of it, easily recover, loop back around, and immediately start looking back up the ice where his forwards will have exited the zone, and he can look for options of a counterattack right from there. And this is a player that I think has some real upside in terms of the breakout game and off of retrievals that he forces both down and deep in the D zone, as well as what we just saw here in rush defending. Next, we're going to look at that defensive retrieval game, and especially one particular habit I liked of his in this game against the Kelowna Rocket, and that was his ability, or his desire, I would say, to initiate board battles in situations where perhaps he gets contested possession of the puck, down low, snuffs out number 8, but number 7's immediately coming over here. This is a player that's not afraid of getting himself into a board battle where he's being pressed from behind. He trusts his strength, his physicality, to keep that possession, to shove opponents away, and to wait for support to arrive on either side of him or behind. And he's a player that is able to then get the puck out with control from those more contested situations in a really impressive way for a player this young. But of course, the size is a helping factor in areas like these. Despite being a player with some limitations in his handling ability, Mrtka has some really nice flashes of problem solving with the puck on his stick under pressure, especially in the defensive zone off of retrievals. So in this situation, let's say Mrtka has just gained possession of the puck, and he doesn't have a particularly clear, easy pass option from here, but he wants to progress play up the ice, and he sees that he has streaking wingers that could be dangerous outlets. This is a player that is unafraid of luring in pressure, and often multiple pressures, and being able to cut against the grain of that pressure. So something that we're going to see often with Mrtka is that even though he's not a dynamic handler, his sense of timing and anticipation allow him to, when pressure arrives, to just easily chip the puck into space, follow it, even when it's a pretty tight gap to force his way through, and he's no small player by any means, but he's done this quite regularly this season, and especially in recent weeks in the viewings I've caught, and this kind of ability to skip past forecheckers and then just make a simple outlet pass, for instance, to a centerman here, who then has options going in either direction here, with the defense having backed off. So Mrtka, despite not being the most dynamic on puck, has some really nice flashes of habits and composure with the puck on his stick that could flourish into a well-rounded distribution toolkit at the NHL level and in a top 4 capacity. But that wraps up this second segment. In the final one, we're going to be diving in to the projections, where Radim Mrtka is going to go on draft day, where he's going to play in NHL lineups if he hits his upside, what his NHL floor is, as well as which teams would make really good fits for this player. But first, a quick message from our sponsors.
When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for an even bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Alrighty, let's wrap up the show here in the final segment on Radim Mrtka, one of the most interesting defensemen in the 2025 NHL draft, and one that I think has a reasonable chance at even being a top 6 or even top 5 selection come draft day, with the lack of defenders in the top 10 of the draft in this year compared to last season, especially, where there were so many options on the blue line. And let's start with that. Where is this player going to go on draft day? I think he could go as high as 4th overall, because I don't think has been a clear player yet to be the second defenseman picked on draft day. There's a couple contenders, and I think the 2 biggest ones are in the WHL. Radim Mrtka and Jackson Smith, who I'm going to be covering in a video very soon as well. I think it's kind of a head-and-head race between those two. Maybe Logan Hensler is in there as well, and Matthew Schaefer may very well be off the board at 1st overall. So a lot of teams will be interested in picking a defenseman in the following selection. So don't be shocked for Mrtka to go higher than you might expect him to go going into draft day. So I think he could go that high. I think he could also go as low as maybe 13th overall. There are some question marks, I think, still around this player. I think with the skating, there's still some wonkiness there. The decision making defensively has gotten really steady, but the on puck decisions definitely still have some growing room. And overall, there's still an element of chaos in this player's game at times. That's becoming less and less frequent, which is certainly helping his projection. But there might be teams that still have a couple question marks, and he drops outside the top 10. But if I had to bet at this point, I would be taking my swing on him being a top 10 pick rather easily, and even pushing inside that top 5, because again, with his profile, his size, his strengths, his intelligence, the scanning habits, the comfort with which he's transitioned to North American hockey, and just how much he's improved a previously pretty poor team with the Seattle Thunderbirds is quite astonishing, playing 30 minutes a night. So a lot to like with this prospect. And I think that there's some real NHL upside here as well. I believe that he could be a true top 4 defenseman who can shut play down defensively, but is also a useful component in the breakout, and has some running, so some room to grow as well, in terms of the offensive game and getting involved offensively, activating more dynamically, and going for more give and goes, and pass and moves in the offensive zone rather than just in transition to get in, to get entries. So definitely still some growing room with this player, but some distinct top 4 upside. If everything hits, maybe you get a number 2 defenseman out of this player. I can't say I'm overly confident in that projection as of right now, but I think that there is that possibility. But I think more likely would be an upside of a number 3, like the main guy on your second pairing that plays big minutes on the penalty kill, can even fill in on the power play if you need him to, and overall just drives really good possession results at even strength. And in terms of NHL floor, I think it's pretty high. I think he's going to be a bottom pairing guy at least. This is a player whose profile screams NHL to me. The progress he's made this season bodes very, very well. And on top of that, of course, with his combination of footwork and physicality and intelligence and composure that's been growing so much in his game in recent months, this is a player who's going to get the opportunity to prove himself at the NHL level, in a bottom pairing capacity, at the least in my eyes. And in terms of player comps, this is a thing that's always a little bit difficult because there's never a perfect player comp, or extremely rarely is there a perfect player comp. Every player is individual and unique and plays the game differently, thinks the game differently, and has a different profile, both physically, statistically, and in terms of habits. That said, some defensemen I think bear some similarities in attacking it from different angles, of Mrtka's game. Would be Adam Larsson of the Seattle Kraken, a physical, shutdown defensive defenseman who knows how to use his physicality very proactively, takes space and time away from the opposition, has an active stick, and layers stick and body very efficiently against the rush. A player that I think has gone underrated, for quite a while in terms of just how effective he's been defensively in the National Hockey League. There are some similarities in terms of how he defends with Radim Mrtka's habits as well. In terms of the offensive runway and perhaps the on puck game, I see some flashes of Rasmus Ristolainen, but with some more composure than we've come to know Ristolainen at the NHL level. Of course, the last season and a half, 2 seasons have been a lot better for Ristolainen in Philadelphia, but there were a lot of seasons there, a lot of years, with very difficult decision making, also kind of being shoehorned into a role he shouldn't have been playing in Buffalo. But still, I think a player with some really great combinations of mobility, physicality, and puck skill, that I think Radim Mrtka could learn from in terms of layering those things together to solve problems on puck. And with his added composure, which Ristolainen still lacks, with the puck on his stick, I think that there's definitely some interesting runway, in terms of the transition and offensive game for the big Czech right shot defenseman. Last but not least, Aaron Ekblad also comes to mind. I think this is a bit more in terms of impact where you're going to see Mrtka land. Ristolainen started his career trying to be developed into an offensive defenseman, Adam Larsson's always been a pure defensive defenseman. I think that Mrtka is going to be a bit more in between of a two-way impact, and Ekblad comes to mind there as a comp. Very proactive physically, of course. With Ekblad has a lot of leadership qualities as well, obviously, but in terms of the rush defending habits, the breakout capabilities, the pragmatism in terms of the handling rather than trying to dangle through opposing structures, making the simple play into space and making a quick pass from there to just progress play intelligently, quickly, and with control. That is, I think, Mrtka's game, and that reminds me of Aaron Ekblad. Finally, last but not least, to wrap up the episode, which teams would this player fit on? And I'm looking over at the Puckpedia draft list in terms of the current NHL standings and where the teams would be picking if the season ended today. And I'm looking in that 4 to 13 range, a bit more for the 4 to 10 range, because I don't think Mrtka is going to be available all that late on draft day. There's a couple teams that stand out. The Seattle Kraken, we just mentioned Adam Larsson as a comp. I think that they lack any player of this profile in their system, and would really love to add in a guy like Mrtka to play those big shutdown physical minutes, and to have that profile in their prospect pool, because they just don't have it on either the left side or the right side at this stage. The Anaheim Ducks, I think, also makes sense. They have Tristan Luneau as their top right shot defense prospect, but beyond that, it's not the deepest pool there. That's an area of weakness that they still could address in the draft. Of course, they did a couple years ago with Jamie Drysdale, but that ended up in the Cutter Gauthier trade acquisition. So there's a bit of a hole to fill at right D in the prospect pool, and I think Mrtka would be very much up their alley. St. Louis Blues, I definitely think this is a great fit for both the player and the team. St. Louis loves aggressive defenders who play with physicality, that don't need to get on the score sheet to be valued, to play big minutes, and to be loved by the fans. We've seen that with Colton Parayko in recent seasons. I think Radim Mrtka would be a great player to kind of bring into that fold to play potentially big minutes for a long time in St. Louis. Next, the Montreal Canadiens. I think this could be an interesting fit for the team, where right shot defense is still perhaps an area where they might want to add. They definitely could also look at center. I definitely think the Habs will be curious about selecting a center with their first round pick this season. But if Mrtka's on the board where they are picking, if that ends up being 10th or 11th overall and he drops and is available for them, I could see them pouncing on that opportunity. They don't have this profile of player in their system in the NHL or in their prospect pool whatsoever, in terms of a massive defenseman that can play big shutdown minutes, that you can also mold in terms of playing a pacey on-puck game, and playing the type of modern hockey that the Habs want to build in their team. I think Mrtka would fit in very nicely there. And if you end up with Reinbacher and Mrtka as your future right side of defense in your top four, with a guy like Alex Carrier on your third pairing, I think that's a pretty good constellation to build off of, especially when you have the dynamism of Lane Hudson on the left-hand side. And that wraps up this episode for us today. I think there's a lot of teams that would be really interested in this player. I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below if you're watching on YouTube. What team would be the best fit for Mrtka? Which team would you like to see him landing in, whether that be for his own development or for the team's needs, as well as what your thoughts on the show are. Please let me know. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, you can head on over to Locked On Fantasy Hockey, where Flip and Steel break down everything in the fantasy hockey world for you, and you can learn how to build not only the most competitive, but the most sustainable fantasy hockey roster to win your leagues and beat your friends. That wraps up today's episode. I'm your host, Sebastian High. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope that you tune back in very, very soon.